Thank you very much, Ron. Really appreciate that. And that was a great intro into the power of IBM. So thanks everybody for attending. I'll be unpacking the IBM story in a few different ways. I want to talk about our hybrid multi-cloud approach, and some of the other speakers have already spoken about that. I'm going to talk about how it's really driven and being built from an enterprise perspective. And then I'm also going to go into how we're helping our clients make that journey from where they are today, whether it's completely on-prem or perhaps on-prem with some cloud native stuff in a public cloud, to actually moving their entire organization, not only to a hybrid cloud environment, but also the culture and all the other elements that you have to get right to make sure that this journey is successful. So I'm one of the cloud modernization offering leader for IBM in this space. And, feel free to populate the chat with any questions you may have. More than happy to answer them. And I'll start moving on with the presentation. Thanks. Okay, so the first part that I want to talk about is really our clients' journeys, right? I mean, we all talk about the bits, the building blocks of cloud, whether it's hybrid cloud, public cloud. Hybrid is really everywhere where everybody is going. But I think, the real power of that platform and what it provides to the business, ultimately IT is really there to support the business. That is really where the key intersection is. What we're seeing in the future is that a lot of the leading organizations are moving towards a cognitive enterprise, new ways of working, intelligent workflow type of environment where they leverage the internal data that they have about their clients and their own internal processes and optimize those by leveraging a hybrid cloud environment. So just wanted to put that context out there. You can go to ibm.com, look, just type in cognitive enterprise and you'll get a whole understanding about what we actually mean there. But for us, from our perspective, and just to give you a 50,000 foot view on that, a cognitive enterprise is really a company that leverages AI, machine learning, intelligent workflows in the way that they do things. And this is really built on top of exponential technologies, and I'll get into that. It's things like blockchain, 5G, and there's a number of other elements in there as well. So how do you take some of those new building blocks, those new emerging technologies, and how do you benefit the business as a result of that? It's a really key part there. Now, of course, AI is nothing without clean, reliable data, right? If you can't build good AI systems if the data is not there, or if it takes a lot of time and effort to actually get to a point of view where that data is actually actionable. And also, obviously hybrid cloud facilitates a lot of this, and it needs to be flexible, it needs to be open. I know we've heard other folks talk about that as well, but this is actually a mantra. And one of the reasons for our purchase of Red Hat is really to infuse not only the technology and the techniques and the platforms, which we were already sort of part of, we're big contributors to open source, but also the culture and the way that Red Hat from its culture is starting to change IBM and the way that we think as well. So, really key point there in my opinion. We really believe, IBM has reinvented itself 5 times over the last 109 years. And we really believe that the cognitive enterprise is really where the future is going. And all of the things that we're going to talk about in this section are really there to make that happen, right? So, so I'll move on to the next slide. So I want to talk about, the early days of cloud and where, and what happened in that sort of environment, and where do we see the enterprise side of it really going. Originally, it was mostly focused on public cloud. AWS was first to market, and there was lots of, easy credit card swipe and spin up a infrastructure as a service, a VM, right? And what we saw is that a lot of that was customer driven. A lot of that was from an organizational perspective. It was driven through the businesses, the business wanting to create new ways of engagement with their customers and doing it in a way that they could flesh things out before they actually scaled them. So it was really a customer sort of driven side of uptake of public cloud, and a lot of experimentation in that space, in the UX space and the AI space happened around that time. Also, we saw that portions of enterprise workloads were being moved. Now, these were really sort of edge workloads. In other words, they were applications that were already sort of compliant, largely compliant with public clouds, and they could be easily moved either through a lift and shift type method, or we saw a lot of net new, systems of engagement type of development, cloud native development happening. So sort of more at the edges. It wasn't really the large portion of mission critical workloads that actually run a lot of the enterprises that we IBM work with. So now what we're seeing, moving, fast forwarding into today's world, what we're seeing is this is really an enterprise-driven innovation. So, the enterprise is trying to unlock the data that it has about its customers, augment that with data that's available from other sources and other organizations who are monetizing some of this data, and really being able to use that to carve out new markets and new revenue streams within their organization. So it really is a business enterprise driven. We're also seeing that it's a hybrid cloud environment. Most of our clients have multiple clouds, and they have a substantial footprint as well. So how do you run these things? How do you run something in IBM Cloud, in Azure, or on-prem? And how do you do that consistently at an optimized run rate? How do you do that securely? And how do you manage these things? Do you use the individual management components out of all of these areas, or do you bring something that's unified together to help you actually manage that? We're also seeing that, you can sort of see the stats there. 67% of mission critical workloads are still on-prem, right? And so this is where we see a lot of scope for services, helping our clients. And as Ron mentioned, and I'll talk about IBM services a little bit later, but we are an agnostic provider of services in the marketplace. And I'll go into that a little bit later on. So that's really where we've been and where we see the industry going from a cloud perspective. Okay, so cognitive enterprise. So what actually makes up a cognitive? I talked at a high level, what it is in IBM's view. Just sort of wanted to layer a little bit down and peel the onion of what that really is. Now, really, it is an agile innovation culture, right? Having the principles, the skills, the culture change happen, organizational change in a way that facilitates innovation within your own organization, right? And that's really the top part that you see up there. Now, that's really powered by an ecosystem of business platforms, right? So we are building business platforms, and I'll go into the platforms that we're building for the financial services sector later on, so you can sort of see what that means. So really having a deep understanding of industry processes, because that's where really a lot of the mission critical workloads actually differ. The applications that run, say, a petroleum company is very different from an application stack that runs a bank, for example, or even runs a retail supply chain type of company. So, understanding those industries in depth and building out platforms that specifically support the types of workloads or the business capabilities that those industries really need at an industry level, that's a very, very important piece of the cognitive enterprise. You can sort of see the cognitive enabled workflows, and this is where you really infuse AI and optimize some of the workflows, some of the business processes, all the way to simple stuff like removing swivel chairs, etc. But really optimizing all of that and using AI to work out what level of optimization is actually required and what level of efficiencies that can gain. That's made possible with the exponential technologies that I mentioned before. So, all of these things, you guys all know how this has impacted the industry, right? 5G is going to bring a lot more data to the edge and a lot more processing at the edge, which today, large corporate databases are pretty much still sort of monolithic. Yes, we have, large databases within clouds, more cloud native, but, if you look at, the average enterprise customer, majority of the core data is still on-prem in sort of monolithic type of RDBMS systems, right? So those things are going to change. Internet of Things, there's a lot more information coming in from various sensors all over the place. You know, telecommunications has a lot of this. Retail is really getting into a lot of this. All of these platforms and these technologies are fundamentally going to change the way that they can be leveraged. And, you know, uses today for blockchain, you fast forward 5 years from now, there could be completely different users and perhaps even a different technology based on blockchain. So things are changing very quickly, but these technologies really have the power to make a big difference for organizations. And if you can codify how these things are used in your enterprise, it's really valuable. Now, all of this has to be fueled by data, and that data has to be, you know, your own data. That's where a lot of the gold is. A lot of our enterprise customers, you know, the understanding of their customer is very unique to them. Yes, some of their competitors may have some information, but really it's unique to them. How do you augment that with publicly available data? How do you augment that with data that you can license from other, say, monetized APIs? I mean, Uber, you know, for 4 APIs were needed to actually bring that to market. So you can sort of, and external APIs, by the way, publicly available information. So you can sort of see how taking your data, augmenting that with other data and making sure that data is clean such that the AI can take advantage of that is going to be really important. And where we're going to be focused on, which is really the last 2 down here for this specific discussion, is really around the application stack, right? So all of this is, you know, the things above is really what the business, what is really driving the business, but how does that manifest itself? Yes, you could argue that, you know, the exponential and the data is all part of it, absolutely. But, you know, from an IT perspective, it's really about the applications and the functionality that they provide. And then the hybrid cloud environments that ultimately those applications live on, right? So just to give you a little bit more of an unpacking of what cognitive enterprise is from an IBM perspective. Okay, so moving on. So how do we accelerate this journey? You know, how do we accelerate and what building blocks do we put in place to allow companies to become a cognitive enterprise? So one of the big things, I mean, and there are a number of different things that we're doing, but I just wanted to focus on Cloud Paks. Ron mentioned that IBM has been, you know, taking all of our traditional software that you used to be able to buy previously just as standalone, install on your own environments. Well, we've been turning all of those elements, all of those major applications, I think there's 95% of the portfolio, to be able to run on Red Hat OpenShift. And this is OpenShift we see as the equalizer. It is really the component that's supported on all cloud platforms. You know, you'd be hard pressed to find a cloud provider. It's got to be really niche that's not providing Red Hat OpenShift support. And this provides a way for us to be able to, you know, abstract where things are running, what cloud it's running on from the actual workloads and the applications that run on it, right? It's almost, you can consider it almost as a shim, right? It's Kubernetes based, so, you know, it's all built on open source and the community collaboration that's happened around Kubernetes. But it's an enterprise implementation of that. It allows our clients not to have to worry about the plumbing, right? So if you work with, you know, EKS or AKS, well, you have to start doing the plumbing yourself, right? And this is a platform that does all that for you. And not only that, it has IBM's middleware stack on it. So if you have, you know, many of our customers, you know, run obviously some IBM software, and then, you know, buying the IBM Cloud Pak for data, for example, gives you access to a number of the packages that you may be using in a way that can run anywhere. It can run on any cloud, whether it's AWS, IBM Cloud, on-prem, anywhere you need it to run, it runs. So it's pretty much, it allows our IT departments really to focus on a sort of a build once and deploy anywhere model. And that's really the basis of Cloud Pak. So I just wanted to talk about that here. And you can sort of read some of the stats down there. It's all designed to be scalable. Obviously, cloud aware, so it can scale out as well. There's a number of different cloud packs. We have a cloud pack for integration, cloud pack for data, and there's 7 or 8 other different incarnations of this. So something that, I think you should take a look at. Go to ibm.com and look at cloud packs and familiarize yourself with the new way that IBM is packaging our software and providing I would say, really allowing a lot of our enterprise customers to start doing what they really care about doing, rather than having to build all the plumbing, get everything ready, and then actually start doing what they would like to do. So that's really the value of IBM Cloud Paks in sort of a simplified fashion. Okay. Now, I'll sort of stop there for a second. Are there any questions, Michelle, that I can't really see the chat, so I just want to make sure that I'm...
No, we're okay right now. There's no active questions in the chat.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, moving on. So we talked about Cloud Paks, which is really the layer on top of a hybrid cloud environment. Now, I want to talk about IBM Cloud. Really, IBM Cloud has been fashioned on 3 principles, right? The first is open innovation. We've been part of most open source communities. Kubernetes in the early days, you name it, IBM's been involved in one way or another in that environment. So, and also I think the influence of the Red Hat purchase and keeping that mindset open and open innovation, I think has really been a key part of it. You can sort of see some of the stats down there. The second one is security. Now, security, a lot of our clients initially had lots of concerns around security. Is my data secure? And we've all heard stories about, some S3 bucket being left open and things being, things landing in the wrong hands, right? So security is at the core of IBM Cloud, right? And we do allow you to do unique things like bring your own keys, etc. You can see some of the stats down there. IBM security integration is another real key as well, where we rank very highly. I think we're the highest rank in the Gartner quadrants around security. So that's all integrated into the way that our cloud works. And the last part is enterprise grade. I mean, we didn't build this cloud for somebody to swipe a card and set up an infrastructure as a service to do some small stuff. This has really been built for enterprise workloads, mission critical workloads. And you can sort of see the coverage down there, everything from bare metal all the way to supporting, AIX, IBM I, Z, and we've got specific industry type clouds as well. So, very, very heavy focus on enterprise grade infrastructure and plumbing. And the last part there, you just sort of read into just some stats about the IBM Cloud itself. I think the real beauty of IBM is that our ability and where we've been and where we're going. I think just the, if you rewind IT and, we've sort of invented the mainframe, we understand all those environments. iSeries, iSeries runs still a lot of distribution, warehouses, etc. It's still a key component of a lot of businesses' functionality. And then all the way up into, public cloud type, we sort of have a depth and breadth across the entire spectrum. And that's where I think, IBM services, looking at this more agnostically, we can look at that across that whole landscape, as well as looking at other landscapes such as GCP, Azure, AWS, and we can make decisions and help our clients really co-create what hybrid cloud actually means for them, right? And that's where I think, IBM bringing the Red Hat story, the IBM Cloud story, and the IBM services story together, that's how we're really helping our clients go through this journey. Okay, so IBM Cloud. So I just want to touch on one, and 45 minutes is not enough to go through all of this stuff, and I do have something at the end that you may be interested in. But just a manifestation of IBM Cloud in a major market, right, for banking. So we've created a cloud that's essentially a cloud that's really designed for banking environments. One of the first customers that we're working with is Bank of America. And this cloud is really built to ensure that their compliance, auditing, security, and then making sure that, we've embedded as much of the frameworks around this industry into the cloud as well. So it's really a fit for purpose cloud. And it's just one manifestation of the way IBM is coming to market. We really are trying to be enterprise industry specific. And this is the first example, and I'm sure there'll be others. But this is the first example of IBM Cloud really being tailored to a specific industry that I guess the participants in that industry are really starting to take notice. So just as a level set there to sort of show where IBM Cloud is going. Okay.
And we have a question in the chat.
Okay.
Someone is saying, are you implying misconfiguration isn't possible in the IBM Cloud? Sounds like it.
Yeah, no, I'm not implying that. I mean, misconfiguration is so there's two things, right? So it can either be human error or it can be badly designed, right? What I'm saying is that with a lot of the cloud packs and a lot of the plumbing that needs to happen, especially at the application level, a lot of that's done in cloud packs. Yes, at the public cloud level, you still do need to do that, and obviously we have experts who understand IBM Cloud and know how to avoid some of these things. But yeah, I mean, if it's human error, that's something that's that's very difficult to avoid. Yes, when we sort of talk about DevSecOps and how we deploy to clouds and what sort of gates you build into that process, that can help eliminate some errors. Like we're working with some clients where as we deploy things to cloud, one of the checks are security checks, and if you don't pass a security check, the container is actually just shut down. And there's a number of different things that you can build into that environment that sort of ensures that there is a level of, I guess, error fixing or error correction as part of the processes that you put in place around it. So hopefully that answered your question. Okay. So moving on to the journey. So, so that was more about, the cognitive enterprise, how we're leveraging Red Hat to bring solutions to the market and what IBM Cloud is really all about. So I'd love to shift gears now and really start to talk about the journey. Cloud has been around for many years now, and only 33% of workloads have actually moved to cloud so far. So why is that? And I want to go into this in a little bit and really talk about it still from an enterprise perspective, because we believe this is the spectrum. There's lift and shifts have been done and are continuing today. And a lot of the tools that you see in the marketplace are not around modernization. They're all around lift and shift. And then there's a lot of greenfields, net new cloud native development happening in cloud as well. And that's, that's the nirvana. But you can't rewrite all of your mission critical systems that run organizations. You can't lift and shift them completely, and you can't rewrite them all either. So, and there's different pros and cons around some of these things. You may be able to lift and shift temporarily to a place before you actually modernize and make them more cloud aware, but that's just the spectrum that we see. So I'm really going to be focused in on that middle bit there that my particular organization really focuses on. So, okay. So what should successful enterprises do to accelerate their cloud journey? And what's really, preventing some of these things? So some of these attributes on the left-hand side here are really some of the blockers, right? So the workloads are very unique. Some of the data needs are very specific. There's compliance issues. There's data centricity issues. The logic really needs to be close to the data to avoid latency type issues. There's lots of things that you have to consider as part of this journey. And a lot of it is around the due diligence that you do. So when you think about the journey, don't skimp on the due diligence that you need to do up front to make sure that you uncover all of the roadblocks, all of the things that may prevent you from making this move, whether it's a migration or a modernization, or even net new reimagining type work. you want to make sure that you understand all of the interconnections, all of the things that are going to prevent that application from moving to a cloud in a way that minimizes the risk to your business, right? It's typically, in this journey, is typically not what you know about the applications, what you don't know about the application that really ends up killing you in this journey. So this is where, really understanding your workloads, both from a top-down perspective, but also from a bottoms-up perspective, so that you understand, how all of these components connect together. Legacy systems dependence, right? I mean, as Ron said, there's still lots of legacy environments out there that run critical parts of many businesses. So, what approaches are you going to take in doing that? And how are you going to be able to manage those environments when you're actually in this journey? So how do you keep the old running while you're building out new and trying to move these things into their optimal environments? How do you keep these things running? How does the business still leverage the old and the new and still have a consistent view of your organization? So very key point there. Multiple clouds and vendors, right? So this is why we call it hybrid multi-cloud. Very few of my clients are actually single cloud, and even the ones that are typically are early in their journey. And once they really start to get down into the journey and start to get into mission critical workloads, the hybrid cloud discussion starts to then fade away, because there are advantages to having multiple clouds and having a simplifying, I would say, simplifying the journey of making these applications cloud aware, rather than trying to constrain them into one specific target, which is, a concept that I see a lot with our clients, in that they will start the journey with a target in mind. And that target in mind would have all the bells and whistles, all the ideal things. But when they actually look at their application landscape, the cost of getting this landscape into that environment, it just becomes very expensive. So this is where, you have to be pragmatic. It's pretty much probably what I'm trying to say here, in the way that this unfolds for our clients. So just something to be aware of. Technology generation gap. Yeah. So skills, right? How many people really understand the intricacies of containers, right? And how to manage containers, and not just, a handful of containers, but thousands of containers, right? How do you do this in a way that will scale, without having to, add huge amounts of overhead to actually get there? So, that operating model, from the old operating model into a new hybrid multi-cloud operating model, the skills, the organizations, we typically have, it's throughout the evolution of IT, we sort of had this centralized mainframe, then we went decentralized, distributed, and that created silos everywhere. And now we're starting to sort of come back to a middle ground. And this is where, breaking down some of those silos and taking out some of the inefficiencies in our clients' enterprises is really a part of the journey as well. So on the right-hand side there, we just sort of, I think we sort of explained something like that. But yeah, you can have a read of that. Okay.
And Harvey, we have a couple questions in the chat. Amit would like to know, how do you support migration from initial build in an on-prem to hybrid cloud environment?
Yeah. And that's a great question. And this is where I think, OpenShift really comes into its own. Now, regardless of where you're going to deploy it to, if you can modernize or migrate something into a container, without having to do all sorts of gymnastics to get it there, that is the ideal landing pad in my view, because you're going to essentially put that into a DevSecOps pipeline, and and you're going to be using sort of cloud native concepts to actually deploy that, right? You might do blue-green deployments, destroy containers. There's the notion of patching things is all gone. So if you focus on, and this is what we try to do as we migrate and as we modernize our clients' enterprise workloads, we try to land them in containers as much as possible, because that really does reduce the ongoing TCO of running that environment. And it's, you don't need the sorts of roles that you needed previously. You need new roles, but you don't necessarily need the old roles as well. And that allows, you know, I guess, skills to be kept current, but it also means that you're not, you're using capital more effectively, right? So that's what I would recommend, is that migrating modernization into container-based targets will give you that freedom. You can keep it on-prem, you can deploy it to a private cloud, you can deploy it to a public cloud, and that move is relatively simple. Now, you've got to make sure that that application can function in a container in its entirety, right? And it doesn't need to be one container; it could be multiple containers. But that whole business application should be able to run in containers. If you only containerize, say, the logic and don't move the data, well, then you're going to create a dependency, and it's not going to work as optimally as it probably could. So, there are some intricacies involved in those decisions that you make as part of that process.
And we have another question. This one comes from Andrew. What are the advantages of multi-cloud apart from being locked into a single vendor?
Yeah. So I think, the advantages of multi-cloud is that I think if you look at every cloud, they all have their strengths and weaknesses, right? And I'll be very transparent. Some clouds do certain things really well. And if you do only select one cloud, well, that's it. Whatever, and I'm not going to go into specifics here because this is a wide forum here. Happy to connect with people offline and talk about my experiences in this space. But I typically find that no cloud yet is optimal, right? And this is where picking a single supplier can often complicate your journey, right? And this is where not having a dogmatic view and really looking at, yes, this may be my preferred choice, but if this makes the transition of 30% of my applications into this environment 3 times harder, I don't think you need to then discount potentially other providers as a result of that, because all you're doing is just transferring one cost for another, and that's it. So I'm not sure that you really should, and I'm not sure if you're talking from just a general knowledge perspective, or when you're talking about it from your specific organization. There are always specific things that can negate that view, because it may be dependent upon the way that you use cloud or the way that your workloads run, how much they scale, all of that kind of stuff. So there may, there's caveats around those comments. But in general, that's what I found in the industry. Okay. Any other questions, Michelle?
Not at this time.
Okay, great. Okay. So IBM services. So yeah, I just wanted I put this in here just to sort of say, who are we? I want to make sure that the folks on the call understand how IBM services have come together. This is neither a technology company that focuses on the bits and bytes or service line. It's neither a full service. It's an amalgamation of the two, right? And this is really where we're bringing the full stack of services that you see there, from digital strategy and IX design, and really focusing on some of the way that your customers are and even your staff are interacting with the whole stack, with the whole IT stack, to cognitive process transformation. This is where the new ways of working, intelligent workflows. How can you bring more efficiencies in the way that your workforce actually does its work, and even move outside of that process? How do your suppliers interact with you, and how could that be made more efficient, more economical for both them and yourselves, and lower the cost? Cloud application innovation. This is where our team comes in. This is where we look at your portfolio and provide options and agnostic options, right? Across all providers. We help you build business cases. We sort of co-create the roadmap for this journey with you, right? And we also supply all of the services that are needed to execute on that as well. So the migration and modernization, we've got migration factories, we've got modernization garages, we've got how do you manage these environments from top to bottom, both from an application perspective and also from the platform perspective as well. How do you bring all of this together? So it's really a holistic organization that's designed to be able to address the entire journey for our customers. And then infrastructure and technology support services, right? So once you look at this from a hybrid perspective, now, you know, you've got automation templates, you've got a whole bunch of other stuff that you have to maintain, add to, and essentially manage, right? Over a longer period of time. So it's not just the setup, it's how do you optimally manage these, you know, and how do you bring automation into that process, right? So instead of, you know, manually building things, everything is automated through, say, Ansible Tower, for example, right? So how do you bring all of those sort of technologies to bear, and how do you maximize the impact in terms of cost reduction in that environment? So just to give you a sort of a placeholder as to, you know, where IBM is actually going. You know, this is really, I would say, over the last couple of years, there's been a substantial investment in open, multi-cloud, hybrid services, and we've spent a lot of investment I would say upskilling and changing the skills of our organizations to actually support this. And this is what, you know, this is all in response to what our clients need. This is in response to how our clients want us to be, And so, you know, it's reflective of that. Okay.
And another question, this one from Annie. What are the considerations to use multiple cloud from multiple vendors or providers?
Yeah. So I think the considerations are, you know, you really have to look at your portfolio, and this is the key part that I've seen. You really got to look at your portfolio and look at the characteristics of that portfolio. What are you coming from? Is there a lot of legacy in your environment? Is there, and do you have a disparate, say, you know, some of our clients have, you know, 5, 6 different types of Unix systems, AIX, Solaris, this, that, and this. And version-wise, lots of end-of-life systems. So, you know, so when we actually look at these portfolios, and I'll answer it this way, when we look at these portfolios, we look at it in 3 ways. We look at the suitability of these and the maturity of these applications to be able to function in a hybrid cloud environment. If they can function in that environment, where should they land? Should it be a public cloud, private cloud? Should it even be on-prem? If it is in a public cloud, should it be in an infrastructure as a service, a PaaS, or could it go to a SaaS offering? And that's really the way that we frame whether you need one cloud or multiple clouds as a result of that. Because there are certain cloud providers that do certain things much better than others, and that may actually be the right place for those sets of applications to land. So that's you know, I don't want to give a cookie cutter answer, but that's the process and the mechanism that we use to actually answer that question for our clients. Okay.
And one more, you talked about co-creation. How does that manifest itself?
Yeah, so co-creation, so there's co-creation in a lot of different ways. One is in how we look at your portfolio. So I'll answer it actually in 2 separate ways. So that's one way, in the way that we look at your environment, and particularly when you think about, you know, cognitive process transformation. This is something that we actually do, and the first thing we do is a design think type session, right? This is an endeavor where you need to have the business representatives, the user community, the operations staff, and the IT apps and app teams, etc., all in one place to come to a common point of view and say, you know, it makes sense to modernize or transform this business process, right? And we really use that concept of design thinking at all levels that you see here. From a digital strategy perspective, that's how we actually, you know, with senior levels in our clients, that's how we actually come to what should the strategy be. Now, there is a lot of infusion of IBM assets in here. We have a lot of industry knowledge in terms of what's working in each of these industries. So we bring some of that to bear, but everything below is essentially that same sort of mechanism. We always start with design think type sessions to not only just work out what other things to do, but it's actually to bring alignment. I mean, a lot of these journeys they run into complications where there is still a siloed mindset, right? If that pervades your organization, doing it in a design thinking fashion, everybody gets to see everybody else's point of view, and there does start to be a coming together and a joint agreement that this is the first thing that we should do. And that's when we talk about co-create. We'll talk about the IBM Garage later on. That's how our app dev teams operate today. So there's co-creation at each of these levels. When we look at, say, an application portfolio, where we are always looking for the business outcomes that our stakeholders are trying to achieve. Are they trying to drive down cost? Is that the primary motivator? Which usually, inevitably, especially in times in these days, these times is absolutely a heavy driver for a lot of industries. But there are other drivers. Ability to bring changes to the market, ability to respond to new sources of data that are available that competitors are potentially using and that some of our organizations are not. And so there's lots of other different drivers for this. Some of it can be skills. Hey, most of my folks who understand these 5 critical applications that run my business are going to retire in the next few years, right? So there's can be lots of different drivers. And for us, even when we look at a portfolio, we want to understand those drivers as we start to look at all of what their environment looks like and craft a roadmap on how to get there. Some of our clients, we can actually and I'll boil it down to something even simpler. From a migration perspective, we can usually execute much faster than our clients can. But there are specific constraints within our clients' organization, specific lead times that you have to give to security, to change management processes. And we often optimize those things with them. And we've got ways to work out where the road bumps are going to be for every organization. But it's all about being able to fit and co-create what the implementation plan is effectively going to be based on their unique requirements. So co-create is embedded in many different places as summary, and it's used to achieve different things in different parts of these layers that you see here. Okay. I'll move on. Okay, so what does a journey look like? And these slides are relatively simple, but I'll just, I really want to talk to what it is that we're trying to achieve. We've really broken the journey down into 4 areas, right? Advise, move, build, manage, right? Relatively easy to understand. We used to have all sorts of complicated ways of delivering this message, but really that's essentially what it is. It's advising. We start off with advising, and by the way, we can enter in any part of this flow, and we often do. But if we want to look at it holistically, starting off with advise, looking at your portfolio while helping you to create a reference target architecture for your hybrid cloud environment, right? So, and taking in your preferences, taking in the needs of your portfolio, really understanding and running various scenarios and saying, look, if we went with this sort of target environment, this is how much TCO reduction we could have. This is what the cost would be. This is what the risk would be of moving there, right? And we run several different scenarios, and we get to an optimal place with our clients where we say, okay, we jointly agree, well, this looks like the best reference architecture for your needs, right? And inevitably it ends up being hybrid. It can be multi-cloud, and often it is multi-cloud. So, and simply by the very fact that some of the workload should go to SaaS, introduces often other clouds as well. So, it's almost by default. We want to make sure that we're looking at both angles of that. We're looking at, what capabilities your business actually needs, your current stack needs, and what aspirational needs would you like to have in the future as well, right? Now, some of that can be nebulous, but we've got a very systematic way of going about this, and how we tease out some of these elements. So in the end, it ends up being basically a roadmap where we've looked at your environment. We said we basically jointly co-create a reference target architecture, which has a business case underneath it, and we have the journey that it's going to take for your portfolios. Now, whether it's at the enterprise level, whether at department level, we prefer at the enterprise level because then you're taking all elements into consideration. What needs to happen to each part of that portfolio and how to actually get to that reference architecture that we've all agreed upon, right? The next part is migration, and this is a move. This is move, right? So this is migration and modernization. Yes, there are still clients where it's still a lift and shift type of operation, and there are mechanisms to do that. Obviously, it's a very well-known methodology, largely tools-based, and it can be anywhere from bulk type moves using, VMware type tools or other industry tools to actually move these workloads into cloud. But then once you start to move up the spectrum and you start to look at modernizing, and part of the advise piece would be, hey, you should modernize, and these are workloads or applications that you really need. You really want to retain them, but you want to put them into an optimal lower TCO type run cost for the future. And that could mean that you're taking out end of life components. We still see a lot of environments with lots of end of life. We see a lot of environments with lots of duplication. So, there's various industries that come to mind that are more, I would say, there's a lot more of application rationalization than other industries. And so making sure that you're taking an optimized portfolio, not just moving your same stuff, but you're taking an optimized view for the applications that really matter, and really aligning that portfolio. So when you do land into the target, you're landing the best version of that business functionality, right? So it's no longer has any end of life components. It's componentized where it makes sense. And you're doing this through your entire stack, right? And there's a full method behind this. We do this in an agile fashion. As we analyze things, we go through sort of an intake process that then we agree upon a technical roadmap for that particular application that gets jointly approved, and that goes into a factory or it goes into a garage type method, which sort of fixes the way that we actually do this. It's global in nature, so it's designed to be cost effective, and that helps move those. And when I say modernize, I'm really talking about remediation, refactoring, that type of stuff. As you move towards re-architecture and reimagine side of modernization, this is really, reimagine is really where the old processes are not working, the old application stacks are difficult to use, and there is a new business imperative that you really want to go after within that business capability. Well, that's where you really, design thinking takes hold, garages take hold, and you start to really think about how could you reimagine the way that IT serves this business function, this business capability. And that's a specific. So as you move up the stack, you're starting to move towards garages. It's a lot more. It's a lot more SME, and we have a lot of accelerators in there as well. But when we talk about modernization, it's remediation, refactor, and then we're starting to move into re-architecture, reimagine. Now, re-architecture is for workloads that used to live on big iron, and large Unix boxes that now need to, instead of scaling vertically, now need to scale horizontally. And what do you need to do the application to actually be able to do that? And what do you need to do with the databases and et cetera that might be underlying those applications? So obviously, the further you go up the modernization scale, the more expensive it gets. So there really has to be a return on investment. You want to sort of draw a line in your portfolio and say, below this line, it makes no sense. It costs too much to actually get the benefit. So that then goes into sort of a contained lifecycle management process. But that's generally how we look at the move portion here. And then the build portion here is, cloud native development. How do we bring concepts like extreme programming, SRE, test-driven development? How do we, we've worked with a lot of organizations to really bring a lot of thought leadership into that place, into that discipline. How do we bring that to bear for our clients as well? And manage is, how do we manage these environments now that you've moved from sort of an on-prem only type environment to this hybrid multi-cloud? Some stuff is on-prem, some things are in one cloud, some things are in another cloud. How do you actually manage this now? How do you manage spend in these environments? And how do you make sure that you're able to achieve that business case that was actually put together as part of the advise phase. So I know I've taken a lot of time here, but this is sort of the element that I really enjoy with our clients. It has the most, it allows me to bring the most innovation to my clients. So it's a really interesting place, and we've built out practices around all of these areas, investing very heavily in skills around all of the public clouds. So we have experts in AWS, experts in Azure, experts in GCP, for example. You know, we're really investing heavily in this space, and we have been doing that for a couple of years now. So that's the, you know, the overall journey. I do have specifics, but I know we're sort of getting close to time. Are there any other questions?
There are no questions in the chat right now.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll go through this part really quickly. I think I've spent a little bit more time in the other one, but I'll go through this really quickly. So essentially, we have, you know, the journey is really built on three areas, right? The approaches that we have across all of this, the method that we have, and it was based on Cloud Innovate several years ago, and now it's the garage method for cloud is what we call it. And what assets and toolkits and accelerators do we have to really bring acceleration, consistency, yet being able to do the whole journey at a pace and scale that's at enterprise scale, right? So we do this as a practice for all of our clients globally. There's always migrations, modernizations going on right as we speak. So how do we enable that as a practice, and how do we do that at scale? Essentially, that thinking, that learning, those construct, those assets that we built, they're all purpose built. It's taking all of that and leveraging that for our clients such that they can do their journey within the business cases that we've jointly defined with them. So that's the overall sort of thing here. I won't go through all of these. It just, you know, we're just elaborating on how we actually do this. It's a 4-phase process. We talk about some of our toolkit and our platforms and assets that we have. We've got 43 assets just in the analytics side of our toolkit. And we take the approach that, you know, if there is a tool out there that does the job really well, we will use that tool. And there are some third-party tools that we use for lift and shift. There are some third-party static analysis, code analysis tools that we use. But the majority of this journey is driven by IBM developed assets that have actually been developed by IBM Research, partnering with our organization to help bring a level of consistency, right? It's not enough to have the data. It's what you do with that data and how do you drive the rest of the process so you actually get to your end goal, you actually do realize the business case. That's where our strength is. And that's where having these assets, and we've developed them over 2 decades, and having them be enterprise ready and helping them and making sure that they can scale. We can take in, you know, hundreds of thousands of data points and be able to drive any one work product or deliverable out of these tool sets. Now, there's a lot more in there. It is a toolkit. There's a bunch of different tools that do things differently. A lot of these tools are being moved from point tools to being workflow enabled, such that we can make this even more scalable with our global delivery footprint, and also be able to deliver it at an optimal price point. So obviously you can see some of the things that we talk about there. And I won't go into these, you know, we just talk about some of the specific things that are relevant. Microservice code generator, there's engineer to cloud, there's tools that help us containerize workloads much more easily, identify the level of effort for containerization, for example. There's a whole bunch of different things that we have that we've developed as part of that. And then the patterns that we see, right? So over 2 decades of doing this, initially from a data center consolidation perspective, and now in the cloud, hybrid cloud world, what are we seeing across all of our industries? How much of that can we codify into our tools? How much of that should we enable the field with, such that we can take those learnings and not waste them, and make sure that they're injected back into the practice and that they're leveraged for all of our clients' benefits? Okay. So we talked about, and this is where, this is where the big differentiator is, right? Garage method for cloud, right? And everybody knows about garages, dojos, and whatever they're called these days. But for us, this is not just that process. It's the underlying tools. It's the underlying way of working that we look at as well. So part of this journey, changing and helping our clients change their skills base and the culture in their environments, trying to break down those silos is a really, really key enabler of part of this method. We're really looking at sort of, for lack of a better word, full stack squads that can support our clients across the board. So we're really looking at new ways of, and we've been very successful with some of our clients around this, starting to actually, even some of our clients are starting to think about this on their own, even before we get there. So, we really see that this is sort of like the forgotten leg of the stool, right? We always talk about the journey, we talk about the platform, the skills and culture is always there in the back of people's minds, but there's been no systematic way of bringing these things together. And that's what we've done with this method. And I believe, this is going to be the way that the industry works in the future. So, okay. Okay, so I won't go to this. It was just a little bit of a plug about us. But, you probably have access to some of this, so I won't go into this. Given in the interest of time, we do have a virtual experience session, TechCon 2020, coming up on August 4th to 6th. Very, very happy to have everybody that's listening here come along, meet one-on-one with some of our practitioners, people who actually do this for a living across the board, across the journey, the skills side of it, as well as the architecture and the platform side of it, right? Understand, kick the tires of cloud packs, understand how we use Red Hat OpenShift. So, this is just wanted to put that out there. There is something that we're doing August 4th to 6th, TechCon 2020. Would be great to see you all there and interact on a more granular level if that's what you would like. Okay.
Harvey, this is Ron Gerber. That was great. One of the things that I just want to make some concluding comments is that, in a sense, IBM is almost the Switzerland here in terms of its neutrality and expertise across all the areas. You'll be getting a link appearing at the end of the webinar asking you to opt in for further follow-up from IBM. That will appear automatically. I encourage people to take advantage of it. So many people ask questions. I want to go to the cloud. Do I do hybrid cloud? Do I do multi-cloud? Do I do open source? What do I automate? The good thing about the IBM team, and I use that in very broad corporate terms, is that they have so many business units to help you understand that. You may just want to deal with your mainframe COBOL applications. You may want to have consulting services help you evaluate the different tools. You see a lot of commonalities. So IBM's got a wealth of resources. I encourage you to make sure you take full advantage of them. And for those of you who hopefully don't want to wait till August, you can always contact me directly, rgerber@angelbeat.com. We could facilitate your discussions with the appropriate IBM staff members. We could forward your response to Harvey. Given the size of IBM, they've got teams broken out by geography, by industry group, etc. So we can make sure that the appropriate experts gets in touch with you. So if you've got projects now, great to go to the TechCon, but we just as soon have you not wait a month and try and get some opportunities just sooner.